2. Here we are, the 65th episode of Wayne's World and Kelly. And maybe the coolest name I've ever heard of in my entire life, we have as our guest, Night Train Veeck. And the way I reached out to him is I watched his documentary, and we never give teasers or anything about our show, but I did this time, and I truly think it was the best documentary / movie or whatever you want to call it on Netflix I've seen for the year. I'm not here with the producers. I've got no relationship with them. They didn't send me a check. Last year was Adam Sandler's flick that he did about basketball. And then you guys, your family, and it's what made it so great was your family. It's absolutely amazing. So it's called the Saint of Second Chances. Everybody see on Netflix. But the great grandson, the 4th generation of baseball, Night Train Veeck, is our guest. And before I shut up, I'm going to say this is what happened. I watched it. I had a cold a while back. I took some cough medicine. I wake up at like 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. I turn it on the TV because I can't get back to sleep. And I stumble on this show. And I'm like, oh, looks interesting. It's about baseball. I love baseball. I'll watch it. And after I finished watching it, I actually went on LinkedIn, found Night Train, and I told him that he has the coolest name I've ever seen, never thinking I'd ever hear back from him. But growing up with Kelly, kind of sucked. So I'm like, I would have loved to have been in junior high school with a name. Hi, I'm Night Train, and you might want to pontificate a little bit about your experience of being called Night Train, because it's probably maybe as challenging as my name, after thinking about it, but it's still, trust me, growing up Kelly would have not have been as fun for you. So please say something, prove people that I don't talk the entire show.
Well, I don't know if I can prove that, so I'm gonna try. But no, that's very kind of you, and I'm really glad that you were able to have a watch and that you reached out to me. I will say that's probably the best way to watch it is 1 to 2 a.m. under the influence.
No, there's no influence here.
Oh, you said you had a cold medicine,
Oh yeah, I was.
So it was a wild ride, and we were all really happy with the way that it turned out. We're an interesting bunch, and you never know how those things can go. And it's one of those where they're getting pretty deep and intimate and putting together a lot of puzzle pieces and knowledge about our family. So we were really, really pleased. The director and executive producer, Morgan Neville and Jeff Malmberg, they did a wonderful job and have become good relationships now, I'd say, even friends, just because of the entire experience. But the name, I when you reached out, I instantly knew I had something there because you kind of gave me the spiel on Kelly, and I can empathize greatly. I think it's the same issues, just a different flavor. And
right.
Whereas I might have trouble on the ID or loan application or
right.
passport or visa or citizenship, you might have issues getting historically worse mortgage rates or all of the injustices that occur with a name like that. So it's an interesting challenge.
Yeah, well, I know that. I got a whole story about that. I'm not going to waste the time on today's show, but yeah, you're right. But people expect this, 5'3", blue-eyed blonde little cute girl walking in the room, and then I show up, and they're like, "Well, that's not what we wanted," So I get a lot of gender confusion, and yet I have a pejorative for a last name, which is all, Actually, so in first grade, I was in the principal's office because I won't say his last name, but Willis hit Alan because Alan yelled, "Hey, coon," to me. And I had, and I didn't get it. And it was just, and then so we're in the principal's office. And then my dad said, remember before you left for school, I told you, Kelly means Irish warrior, and it was your mother's maiden name, your grandfather's last name. And well, now let me tell you about our last name. Oh my God, geez. My middle name's Brian, so I'm kind of safe there.
Oh, there you go.
Dad,
yeah.
Floyd George, though. Floyd George Coon. So enough of that. Let's go back to you. And So they don't, and y'all didn't even really talk about your great grandfather, who was the original family member in baseball. Was there just not enough time? Did it get edited out? Because I think there's a sequel there.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking to a very biased audience, so I'll start with that. But I think you're onto something. You know, I think that there's a lot to cover, and that's kind of one of the weird and kind of neat things in terms of how movies and films are created. You know, there's so much, and they've got to saw it down to
Right.
just 90 minutes or whatever it ends up being. And so I think there's certainly more threads to pull because we've got any number of fun stories. And if it's me, that documentary was half the story. So yeah, great grandfather. I mean, he kind of started it all with us, and got it's a little bit diminished, but he got his job, as I think any one of us would, is talking some trash in the newspaper. And he used to be a sports writer, and any number of people have run a team from their couch. And I think that it creates a weird dynamic in our business because, you know, while they have great perspectives and they're usually spot on, the good ones, you know, sometimes it's a little different from Arlington Heights than it is actually being on the field with any number of implications happening. So, but he
That's the
was well
Diamond
versed in,
last night.
oh my gosh, wow, what a series this has been.
Go Rangers.
So yeah, definitely. They've broken so many records I can't even keep count now. But
Yeah, ones they never thought that existed.
Yeah, yeah. So he became the president of the Chicago Cubs just by writing in and saying he could do it better. And he was well versed in the sports world and in the journalism world, and got the challenge, and he did it. And so that kind of planted the seed for all of the rest of us.
Right.
Why doesn't he get credit for? I know Branch Rickey always gets a credit for integration of African Americans with Jackie Robinson, but you know, you got to dig deep to find out that the signing of Satchel Paige, who arguably, and I don't think there's a big argument here, probably the greatest baseball player in history. Talk about a little bit of that. Don't hear enough about that. I don't understand it. I mean, Satchel freaking Paige, man, right? Don't look back. Somebody might be gaining on you. I mean, the guy is legendary.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of those. I'll say sprinkled in, but there's so many big events like that, and
Right.
and I think who really goes. I mean, you're exactly right. Satchel is one of the best, and I think who really goes unnoticed is Larry Doby, and it's one of those that you know, I have the utmost respect for Jackie Robinson, and I was actually delighted. I think it was Ken Griffey Jr. that suggested Jackie Robinson Day become what it is today, with everybody wearing 42. But
agree. Yep.
He was one of the pioneers, and Larry Doby was running alongside of him and had to experience a lot of the same things that he did, and had to go through and deal with a lot of the same things that he did. And that's always kind of not been given its due. And we've always been big proponents of the Doby family and everything that they've stood for and dealt with and handled with grace, I would say.
That's pretty cool. Now, there's a guy that used to play for the Rangers. I can't remember what his name is. Derek Holland, I think, call him the Dutch Oven. Now, when I was at his house last year, and he has this big foundation event that the 60 times 6, whatever it is, foundation. They're having a big fundraiser for cancer research this Thursday night. But when I was at his house, he has a jersey, Jackie Robinson. And I got to, he goes, you want to put it on? I was scared. I'm like, no, but I'll touch it. So, but there's so many great legendary players in baseball. And just as fans, it's one thing, but you were living right in that world with such history and everything. It's just fascinating to me. Who's your favorite baseball player of all time?
Oh, that's a really hard one, because I learned early we were on the business side of this as well. So, you know, players mean different things to me, and I think in different eras of not only their career but my career. So, I probably have to cop out and give you a few, but as close to I could get to an all-time might have to be Manny Mignoso. He not only did any number of things in terms of being who he was for the White Sox and playing in all of the different eras and decades that he did, and having the tie with my family. He played for the St. Paul Saints for a short time, and but he was just a wonderful guy, and he was really wonderful for the game. He opened up the Cuban pipeline for a lot of the players. They were able to talk to him and get advice and counsel and be able to be a resource, as they came along in their careers. And not only that, he was a wonderful player, by the way. So it's kind of that approach for me.
I love it. And it is a cool perspective. What a perspective to have, Go ahead, Wayne. I know Wayne's and he's got so much stuff he can't stand himself right now.
Oh my God. I guess one comment regarding the name, Kelly asked me about the last name. I said, of course, I absolutely know Bill Veeck, White Sox and everything. And then he said, how about Night Train? And I said, you mean the Guns N' Roses song? And he just laughed and said, no. So that was an introduction to your name, but kind of turning back the clock here, as far as everything that we know that exists in Major League Baseball that has anything to do with fun was most certainly pioneered by your family. There's so many things we could touch on. And yeah, I hope it's not the elephant in the room, because I do want to talk about 1979, but let's go back a little bit prior to that, as far as your grandfather's understanding of how he wants to make it fun. Literally taking a sport that's so steeped in tradition and, wow, here's a novel concept, have fun, which then your father, with the fireworks, the box seats, just everything. Please tell us about that, as far as you witnessing this.
Sure. So I guess to your first comment about name, it's a bum line. It's 3 songs. It's a bad movie. It's it's a couple of other. It's obviously a method of transportation. There's all kinds of things. So pick your flavor. But I guess and no elephants in the room. It's a circus tent, as we like to call it. So the whole room's filled with elephants in my eyes. But it's crazy. It's humbling, and it's really wonderful. I think, similar to the players, that's what guided our approach. And you'll see a little bit of that in the film, but we've always viewed it as about having fun and about getting into the venue and having a good time, whether that's having beers with your friends, whether it's making memories with your family, whether it's being there with your son or daughter or spouse or partner, whatever it is, and building around that. And that's the biggest part of the game for us, and we've always known that it's a bit trite in sports, but it's very true, is that anybody that works in sports knows that you can control just about everything except what happens in the white line. And
Yep.
That's what we would aim to do. And you obviously want to field the best team that you can, but you're only going to win a World Series once every X number of years. And the other times, you've got to fill your schedule with compelling fun. And so that was kind of the onus behind it. But from that came group and party areas, suites, integrated ticket packages, the season ticket. That was great grandfather. And all of these led into promotional calendars and theme nights and kind of bringing everybody into it and making the game really inclusive. At the end of the day, that's what it did. It was the birth of Polish Heritage Night, Mexican Heritage Night, bringing in other groups of people, bringing in their food, their fandom, their families, all of those things into this one place that was the ballpark. And that's kind of all we've ever known. So growing up around it was crazy. I think we had kind of the ABCs with my grandfather and my great grandfather in terms of what was created, and my dad and now myself have been kind of expanding upon that and working with these promotions. They've got a little crazier. I don't know if I know anybody that's locked out 5,000 season ticket holders and still managed to have a wonderful game. So it's been,
that
pretty
part.
crazy.
I love that. The guy's sitting there going, what is he going, popcorn or whatever it was, and again, there's nobody there. I just thought that was classic in the movie. But how about last night? Last night's game was very special to me. You know, I'm pulling for Derek's team. I love to see them win. It was very exciting. But when the guy does the cannonball in the hot tub in the outfield, I'm thinking about your family, and I'm like, now I feel that was like one of the highlights of the game. And before I would have gone, whatever. But it's just, to me, that did that even have any effect on you when you saw that happen last night?
It does. It's funny you ask that, because it does, and I think it's evolved over time. You know, it used to be, oh wow, and I've only known it as and I believe, I'm not entirely sure on this, and there might be other ways, so, you know, fact check, but I think it might have started in St. Paul, and it was, if it didn't start there, it was one of the early teams to have a hot tub out there, and it was just this thing that was suggested by one of the fans, and lo and behold, it happened.
Right.
So when I see these things now, and they're everywhere now, and even sometimes premium areas with pools and other things incorporated into the experience, they're kind of little winks to me as I watch the game, and it's really wonderful to see. And I think that I like to hope that, you know, my grandfather and great grandfather would love to see how they've evolved, because they've changed. You know, they haven't remained stagnant. It's really great to see them come into the modern experience.
Well, I think it did start with the St. Paul Saints. So I grew up in Ollert, Wisconsin. I went to college in Minnesota and stayed there until last year when I moved to Florida. And I had a front row seat on the total development of the St. Paul Saints.
Oh, wow.
Well, you think
went to the game.
Except for, you know, with the night here, I think maybe he had more of a front seat. Just saying.
Ironically, Veeck's never have seats; they have jobs. So I never got to sit down.
Right.
Boom! Here's the highlight reel right there, baby.
I was excited, but it was met with some skepticism, because, you know, when the Twins won the World Series in '91, I was like, okay, we have somebody coming in here, you know, and now it's obviously not in the same level of entertainment or, you know, Major League Baseball, but let's give these guys a chance. And then to see the name attached to it, you know, which again, I hope to go back and cover the 1979 night, but what your dad brought into and what your family brought into St. Paul, to me, is a great example of the American dream. I mean, you know, your dad's against all odds story, which people will have to go and see on the Saint of Second Chances, speaks volumes for itself. But what you built in St. Paul, and then with the new stadium that came up, I think it's CHS Field. I've been to so many games there. I've been in so many corporate events there, and it is a first-class, absolutely beautiful stadium. And wow, is it fun. I mean, you guys hit a freaking home run. And now being part of the Minnesota Twins, I don't think that's changed really any of the dynamics. Have they, trained, you know, with your affiliation now with MLB?
Yeah, I think in name, you know, it has obviously, excuse me, in name it has. I think that it's patently different being in the system and being AAA and all of those things. But in name alone, I think it's still the Saints crew, it's still the Saints experience, and it still stands for all the things that it did in all those years in '91 and at Midway Stadium. And
Midway,
you know, I think it's wonderful to hear you say that. I thank you. You know, it's really wonderful to hear, because it's something that I'm tremendously proud of. You know, a bit myself, but mostly for my dad. And it was really wonderful to see that component in the documentary. And it sounds far cooler than it is, but we had a screening in St. Paul of the doc, and we had a couple around in places that, you know, they thought might be good as kind of friends and family and soft kind of thing. But the one in St. Paul was just so special. because it was the culmination of all of that. And that's where my sister and I grew up. And that's where we started. That's where I got my love for the game. That's where I got my love for the sport, the business side of things. That's where I had one of my first jobs. And it's just unreal to see what it's become. And to go from that dinky little independent league team that everybody liked. I mean, credit to them. There's been a couple of journalists in St. Paul and Twin Cities that recanted is too strong of a word. It's not really that big of a deal. It's just sports. But they came out with stories talking about how they thought initially the Saints weren't going to succeed. And that was mostly everybody. And it was tough because they were this small thing and they had porta potties and who knows. But
I used them. I remember.
Oh yeah, you and me both, man. You probably used it and then I cleaned it. So
sorry for that.
But it's one of those magical things where in sports, every day a stadium deal is born where it's not necessarily the best for everyone involved. And you might be able to make a case that the Saints have really done something special because what's come into that community was born of the community itself. And
absolutely,
it really, even down to the ballpark design, when they worked on that, it really showed how much they cared. It's the wood and the glass and sitting down beneath.
It's amazing ballpark. Yeah. It's so intimate. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's Julie Snow. That was the architect. She came in and she was, I think, much like the rest of us, that little bit of incongruity. She sat down at the table the first day, and I wasn't in the room, but she basically said, "Well, what are these yellow poles down each line? Can we take them down? They're kind of ugly." And we were like,
architects,
we're in. She's the best. And we told her they were foul poles and they had to stay, but think that way for everything else. And
no, she's from Minneapolis, isn't she? Or is she from Chicago? Julie Snow. I know that name.
I'm not sure where she's from. I think she does have local ties to the Twin Cities, I think, but
okay.
She just nailed it. And
she apparently really knew baseball.
Well, she didn't at the time. She was just in the architecture world, and this was her first foray into it. And I don't think there's a better entree. I mean, she nailed it. And we wanted somebody to think about that. We wanted somebody that didn't look at it as this kind of stale traditional thing. We wanted to build something different, and they really succeeded.
Right. So cool. I just so much. Now you mentioned your sister, and I don't tell anybody about the story of your sister when I've become like your one of your biggest South Florida marketers for the movie, because I just think it's so powerful. But I don't know if you want to talk about it or if it ruins the movie or whatever. I can't imagine. I had 5 sisters, and I can't imagine having a sister like that. Not that mine aren't great, but the last, I don't know, 17 minutes of the movie, I'm sitting there just bawling my eyes out. And it could have been the cold medicine, but I watched it again a couple nights ago, and it was the same thing. I just, like, my throat starts hurting, and it's wow. But what is she? I mean, obviously you're probably one of the best sons a dad ever had, but your sister was definitely one of the best daughters that your dad could have had. I mean, just between the two of you, your whole family, so much envy. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you saying that. I think, I guess, well, it's interesting. So we all have history in Southwest Florida, and actually Florida in general. I mean, I was born in Florida, and actually outside of Fort Lauderdale. So it's always been an interesting place for us. But yeah, spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't seen it. Here's me dancing for 3 seconds so that you can fast forward, rewind. But yeah, it was tough. It was really hard. I think we kind of got hit by it twice. 6 years old around, she was beginning to lose her sight. And it was interesting seeing these things come to life in the documentary, the conversations that we'd had and scenarios and all those kinds of things. seeing that and portrayed so well. I mean, Charlie Day did a really wonderful job, and it was mind blowing to see him as my dad and my dad as his dad.
Right.
Unreal.
Right.
But seeing those moments portrayed like that was just something I'd never seen before, and I'd only lived them, and they were not that way. So getting that initially, and then it turning into what it did with Batten's disease, was just unbelievable, punch to the gut. I still remember the day that I got the news, and you never want to go down that rabbit hole of WebMD and the internet, but you do, and I think it's a really human experience, and I made the mistake, but understanding what I was doing, and did it, and it's a horrible thing, and to see that happen to her, and for all of us have to go through that, it's unimaginably cruel, and it was a really tough time. It still is, but it was a really tough period, I think, in all of our lives for any number of reasons, and to be able to have the documentary itself, but some of the footage that came out with her, and some of those moments. Sorry, that's a little emotional for me, but to be able to see those moments on a screen and have them there, almost memorialized, so to speak, was really a gift. And I think the minute I heard her voice, I hadn't seen that footage in 20 years. And the minute that I heard her voice, it was old her. It was who I knew her to be. It was her on the phone when we would talk for hours a day. And that was remarkable. I mean, it just brought me back instantly, and was a nice little glimpse back into the world that was.
So a couple of things. First of all, the fact that, I guess it was your dad that loved to videotape stuff, and saved it, made
I think that was
impact.
from the news. I think that was
that too, yeah. But like when they were traveling around for the 3 months, and there's those video clips of it, it was beautiful. And then when your stepmom and your dad later are in the RV, and they said what the RV stood for, I just freaking lost it. I actually had to go. I missed the next minute. I had to rewind back because it was just gut-wrenchingly beautiful and powerful. And I mean, you're right, to memorialize, your family and then your sister. That's why it's the best thing I could have watched this year, maybe for the decade. I don't know. It was just to be part. I felt like I was part of your family. Like when you popped on today, I feel like I know you, and I don't, but I do. And nothing, nothing but envy and pride to know that your family existed. That's what makes America great, is families like yours. And it blows my mind. So,
well, one of the things that completely, it didn't sear my soul as much as Rebecca's story, because like Kelly, I watched it twice. Like Kelly, I cried twice. I'm having a hard time right now. So when your dad and Libby were going to Owatonna, that's funny because that's where my
oh yeah, you might know this.
Well, yeah, my grandfather is from there, and I went there a lot of times as a kid. I hope I'm getting this part right about when they went to Owatonna, but there was a part where I think, it was when your dad went to Tampa Bay, and he said, okay, I'm working 16 hours a week right now, or a day, or whatever. But if I add one more hour, I know I'm going to get this right. And then she pours the glass of wine, and it's starting to overflow. And she like made it toast your dad and say, okay, congratulations. You missed a lot of parenting with your son. Now you're going to do it with your daughter. And of course that changed everything. So we know that what is representative in a movie, it ain't, to your point where you said a couple minutes ago, it ain't always like that. So maybe you want to comment a little bit on maybe living in your dad's enormous shadow, and how hard that maybe was or maybe wasn't on you. I don't know. Can you explain?
Sure, that's a big one. Probably need a few more hours in a beer, but I think yeah, it is. It's very strange, especially to have it out there like that. And that both the RV moment and that moment are two that get me every time. I don't think I've watched it without crying. But it's a strange thing. It's for me, and I know that he's felt this also. The shadow just gets longer, and sometimes it's light, sometimes it's dark, sometimes it's very motivating, sometimes it's terrifying. I mean, what do you do when your family's created the season ticket?
Right.
You have to evolve. You have to find a new way. You have to create a new letter of the alphabet, and I think that that's what we've all kind of set out to do. And it's been interesting watching that play out. You know, my dad ran from it a bit, and I kind of embraced it in any number of ways as I went along. And it's what's given me my career. And I mean, I don't know, 2,500 baseball games I've worked over 4 or 5 leagues, and you know, worked for the White Sox, and went to Australia and worked there at the league level for a time, and came back and started a soccer team. I don't mind to make this a resume builder, but it's what powered that mentality for me, and it's what's given me that drive. And I think that that's also a very intimidating thing at times. And you know, to your point, when Libby says that, it's very easy to get drowned in a game of 81 games at home, and you think that one more hour that I can make this work. That's a real feeling, and that I can tell you right now, that man felt that. I've felt that, and I think a lot of people have felt that, and that's what we had hoped would come out of this, is those real feelings. It's sure, it's about baseball and it's about us and those kinds of things, but it's about life with baseball as a backdrop. And
Right.
it's seeing that a lot of people deal with these kinds of moments every day. And you know, to your point about it being a little different, it is. I think if there was anybody affected by disco demolition the most, it was him, and I got to be up there too. You know, it changed my life before I was even a concept. And
so how did it? So that was a cultural touchstone in my life at the age of 14, watching the 10 o'clock news with my parents at 10:20 in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. This thing comes on. I knew that what, again, at the age of 14, I knew something was big that was going to happen on the cultural scene and on the sports scene. Again, that's something we could talk about for hours, and has been talked for hours on YouTube or wherever you choose to find it, for maybe our younger folks that are watching this that don't know about it. Can you talk a little bit about the event, what it meant, what happened, and moving forward? Because it was big. And all you need to do is find it on YouTube, and it literally was massive. Am I overstating it? Maybe, I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think you know, I was negative 6 years old at the time, so I think that should be known. But
brings back memories.
It's oh yeah, all the memories of that era were unreal. But it's a fascinating thing, especially, you know, looking back on it today. And you're right, it brought so many things into the equation, whether that's culture and society and baseball and any number of things to it. And that's what made it as successful and unsuccessful as it was. And I still think that a lot of people in baseball don't know how to look at it. And I think that a lot of people in society have started to figure out how to look at it and start to really navigate those waters. But at the end of the day, it was it was a guy trying to draw people to the ballpark because they were struggling with attendance, and over that was trying to please his dad. And he was trying to really make this thing work, and boy did he. But also, a couple of things happened along the way. So I think that's kind of the context surrounding, but it was the story, Disco Demolition. Obviously, you were able to get into the park for the price of the radio station. I can't remember the numbers. I should know that, but
99 cents.
99 cents. So
you had a disco album.
Yeah. And so you brought it in, you got in for $1 and put them into the outfield, and Steve Dahl was going to blow them up in center field. And as my dad likes to say, in between both, it was a doubleheader against the Detroit Tigers. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there were only 3 forfeitures at the time. And this one was this was the third or the fourth, but I think this was the fourth forfeiture, and this was the only one that wasn't an act of God, aka Mother Nature. And between those games, as my dad likes to say, everything blew up. Top of the smoke was a cloud of maybe a strange smelling substance, and in that smoke was his career. And for that time, it was the highest it had ever been. And once it hit that apex, it came down rather quickly. So everything came down, and I think that was emblematic of a lot of things. The event itself, a bit of his career, and a bit of his life. And so to kind of bring it down to, how that impacted me, in what way? I mean, he basically went down into the depths for a while. I became an alcoholic and divorced my mom, and she divorced him. And then, started to kind of realize what was happening around him, and started the way up from there.
Which is how a lot of people do in all kinds of parts of the world. His was just a little bit more known. But I want to make one thing clear. I was in high school when that happened. I am forever grateful. Forget about my love for baseball. The fact that your dad helped to destroy the worst music portion of our lifetime, I'm eternally grateful. And my sister used to compete and win in disco dance contests out at bars. And different things. And I'm sorry, it was the worst music ever, and it pains me to hear it. So I'm very grateful, even though it threw your dad's life into a little bit of a turmoil for a few years. I am telling Kelly Kuhn said thank you, and he'll say, "Who's she?"
I'll pass along the message. I think it's hard to say it's the worst music of the lifetime when something like the Teletubbies exists, but tastes are different. Tastes are very different, and I think it also gave way to house music, which I think it can't be understated. And that's something that was very complicated, but it was born from that, and it's pretty wonderful when those kinds of things happen too. It took some time, and naturally there's any number of ways it could have taken, but they did do that as well. So.
Well, if you could extinguish house music, I think that would be another grateful thing for another generation.
Oh my, you're killing me. You do realize that I created a soccer team called Chicago House, which is the ultimate irony.
I love rock and roll.
So I want to touch on where you're at right now. I know that I did look at your LinkedIn profile, and I saw winningseat.com and a lot of teams that you've been involved in. Tell us about Night Train and where you're at right now in 2023, and how you got here. Let's hear about what you're doing now. We talked a lot about your family.
Oh yeah, well, I'm one of them, so it's deserved. But it's been a wild ride, and I think right now it's about to get a little bit crazier. I can't divulge too much, and I don't like to be the guy with the massive tease, but stay tuned. In the next couple of, I would say 2 to 3 weeks, it's gonna get pretty crazy in the Beck household. It alluded to it a bit in the documentary, and that's in the works, and I think it's in the works in a couple of different ways. But it's definitely going to be on the team side. Just might be a couple of teams.
that I love that tease, and that's
Mhm.
thank you. I love that stuff.
Yeah. But I've been in it my entire life. It's marketing, partnerships, sales, all of those things, any number of functions. I mean, overall, I've just wanted to learn as much about the business and industry as I can, and try and build as much towards that. So again, team experience, league experience, domestic, international, tried to kind of build that up, and hopefully this is the next step coming up here in a few weeks.
Well, I know with the explosion of soccer, and it sounds like you're definitely onto something. I had an intense dislike for the game until my son started playing soccer, and I did a complete 180. I absolutely love the game. I love it so much. Yeah, and he had to get me involved in it because he was participating. But I have so much appreciation for it. I know that with the arrival of Messe down, where Kelly's at. I know the team up in Minnesota is packing the stand.
So
tell us about your involvement in the Chicago market for what you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm out of the team now. I
Okay.
left the team several months ago. But what an experience. And to your exact point, soccer is we do this dumb thing here where you can only be a X person.
Yeah, right.
And I feel like your story is really interesting because that was a bit of my dad. Like I don't think that he really understood the game and the breadth and the depth and what it meant to people.
Right.
Soccer fans and soccer supporters, very different distinction, are way different fans than any other fan in the world. I put cricket actually in there. I worked in Australia in cricket.
I saw that. Yep.
And they're similar, but when we have X number of people watching one of the most compelling World Series games in my recent memory, just because of the records being broken and the back and forth nature and all that stuff, it pales in comparison to what a broken Wednesday night would be watching the Wanderers, play in Division 2 or Division 3 or even Division 1. I mean, they just, it's unreal what soccer has evoked in the world, and it's why it's the world game. And I think that I have an unshakable love for baseball, but I've also really learned to love soccer, and it's a fun game, and you're onto something when you ask about it, because it might be one of the things coming up here soon. But the team in Chicago was an unbelievable experience. The timing could have been a little bit better. I don't know, had I been given the chance to start it at a different time during the global pandemic, might have been an interesting choice, but it was unbelievable. We created a team in about a year and a half, and it was during the pandemic, and built everything from scratch, and here it is, still around today. And it was wonderful to see the amount of support that people gave, and people here especially are really looking for kind of that next stage of fandom in soccer. It used to be the Manchester United, the Manchester City, the big teams around the world, and if you immigrated to the country, you already had your team. So you already had a team that you and your family had been fans of from wherever you might have come from. But now there's that interesting mix of people that had their team, and then 2 generations removed, they're looking for a new one.
Okay.
So there's an independent soccer scene that's coming up. There's the USL, which is kind of the soccer minor league, so to speak. And that's the next frontier. It's kind of like minor league baseball in the 90s. And you're going to see a lot of people looking to invest in those kinds of things going forward, because quite frankly, the cost of investing in major league sports now is unreal. I mean, I don't think there's a team that's under $1.5 billion in any major 7 sports leagues. So it's now starting to branch out. And with, as you alluded to, with Messi, and with, I think, America opening its eyes to how wonderful it can be to be a soccer fan or a football fan, that's really driven driven a lot of conversation.
Is your, I know when your father and I think some of the ownership group, when they sold off, I have the name written down. What was the name of the conglomerate or whatever that the St. Paul Saints were sold to?
Diamond Baseball Holdings.
Diamond Baseball Holdings, yeah.
Mm.
Any chance of your dad, dusting him off and getting out there again, or is what kind of involvement does he still have in anything, I guess, regarding baseball?
In St. Paul, they're divested, so Diamond Baseball owns them there. With currently, he's still a minority owner in Charleston, with the River Dogs, and that's that's a wonderful club too. It's, they're really, and they just, oh my God, they just won their third championship. Pulled the old three-peat, but he's involved with them, and then again, you're asking the right question. That will probably you'll know more about that in the next few weeks.
Awesome. No, I
this was not.
I'm definitely gonna stay tuned to to anything that your family is doing. I guess this is kind of running up against the clock here. I know you're busy, Kelly. I don't know if you have any more questions,
Take your time.
I got a million, but I just looked at the clock and I'm like, holy smokes, this is a 25-minute show. Oopsie, sorry.
we can run over, under, however you'd like.
Oh, we're way over. So let's go another 9 minutes, and then I actually got to get to Miami. But I hate this because this is amazing. One thing that was interesting that Wayne mentioned was about the shadow that you lived under. Well, that shadow is so interesting because your dad lived under his dad's shadow, and his dad lived under his shadow. I'd love to know about your great-great-grandfather, but I mean, it's really, it's incredibly amazing the lineage that you guys have. It's a story that has to be told, and I'm so glad it's out there. My favorite football movie is Rudy, and
nice.
I've watched that movie probably over 90 times, and there's not a time where it doesn't break me at the end. And I think, and I had some other favorite baseball movies. And if they ever do the Derek Collins story, I'll probably be a big fan. But I think this will probably now go down as my favorite baseball movie ever. And there's a lot of great baseball movies, but for your family was amazing, and then they did capture it so wonderfully. So my big question is, did you ever meet Jeff Daniels?
Oh, well, I appreciate it. It's really kind words, and we find it hard to compete with movies like Major League. So that's heavy. But no, didn't get to meet Jeff Daniels. I'm not sure. Candidly, I'm not sure when exactly he was involved in the process.
Right.
I know it was over a few days, and they took the time to record everything and all of that. But I'm not sure when that was. It was a wild ride because I was just finishing up at the soccer team, and I got a phone call from one of the producers that said, "Hey, we're with this production company, Tremolo is their name, and wanted to talk to you." Shout out to Chloe. And wanted to talk to you about just this project and your life and those kinds of things. And fast forward a few months later, we went out to LA, and there's probably 16 hours of me on the cutting room floor, giving the whole story, and 3 hours of me crying. So it's been a crazy experience.
Yeah, I've actually done some movies and TV, and it's amazing. I learned that when you're doing it, don't tell anybody about it, because so much gets cut out. But the parts that you're in are phenomenal, and the whole thing they did. It's so hard to do a documentary.
Yeah,
I was in one with a very famous guy that was pretty footloose and fancy free, I guess, with money. Jack Abramoff, who was a lobbyist in DC, and
he's a lobbyist. I remember that name.
I was in the original documentary about him, and then they made Kevin Spacey. He's some kind of actor. They made a movie with the same title, and I think he got paid more than I did for it. But a lot of stuff I did just doesn't exist. I I started to watch. I'm like, this is a disaster. I don't want to. So to see them do such a great job on a documentary is I think it's harder than making a regular movie. And they captured it beyond to where I truly think it's the best baseball movie I've ever seen. I mean, it's I'm not doing it because it's you know, on the screen. I'm doing it because that was the impact. And I want everybody. I'm a business guy. You know, I'm a part owner of a great business. I've been parts of other ones, and I do business development. I do the same thing you guys do, but for business, not for baseball or for sports, and as Wayne. And there's certain movies that I tell people that, listen, when you need a checkup from the neck up and really, you know, get your game back, you know, either read a certain book or watch a certain movie. And now I've got a go-to movie that if you don't walk away from this movie inspired and just ready to go, then, you know, then just, you know, go on government assistance.
Yeah, I mean, that's tremendously kind of you. I know I sound like a broken record, but I really appreciate it. And it's something that I don't think I'll ever not appreciate, at risk of using 1,000 double negatives. But it's been a really fascinating experience. And what really struck us with them, specifically Jeff Malmberg, the executive producer, and Morgan Neville, because this could have gone any number of ways. I think I said it before, and you've seen those documentaries that come out, and maybe they're compelling, maybe they're entertaining, maybe they're not, maybe they're somewhere in between. What would have really been a bummer is if it had been something that we didn't like, or it didn't come out the way that we wanted it to, or whatever it might have been. And not that there was any shadow of that thought, because once we met them, we knew, you know, they've done such wonderful work. I mean, they were a part of the Mr. Rogers documentary. They did Anthony Bourdain. When you can handle stories like that are complex and have a lot of different facets of life, we knew we were in good hands. And it's a tremendously confronting experience to put all of that out there. And to your point earlier about feeling like you know someone, you do. You now know somebody a little bit more than either one of you thought, and it makes some strangers less strange and some strangers friends, and those kinds of things. And that's been surreal. So I think to be able to, it speaks volumes about their skill and talent in kind of finding the story. And I remember one day very specifically, we went out to LA to get some of the filming, and there was it was essentially their board for the film. And I remember very specifically looking at it and being like, okay, you know, I know how to get people into a ballpark. Like, how do you begin to put this together? And you know, I'm a bit of a nerd about this kind of stuff, and it was really interesting to hear that process. But at that point in time, fairly early in the process, they didn't know what the story was going to be necessarily yet, but they knew the different concepts and threads to pull. And so Second Chances kind of sat atop that in any different facets of all of our lives. And it was unreal to see them pull that out of it, because that they did not go in knowing that was going to be the case. And it was really, really impressive. And it was cool. And it was wonderful to see that it turned out the way that it did, because had it not, I think I probably would have a much different and more difficult time with my life right now.
Right. Oh yeah. There's truly a lot of documentaries that, you know, the people that they're referring to think they're going into something, and then they just manipulate it and twist it and, you know, kind of, you know, dishonor the story. And they did such a great job honoring your story and your family that, you know, wow, you know, it's great to see, you know, you have so much fake news, and, you know, when they did it, I mean, they did such a wonderful job. So go ahead, Wayne. I jumped on him again.
Well, I'm gonna tell you from a boots on the ground perspective of when I lived in the Minneapolis metro area. I probably knew something that your family did not know, and here's what it is. I knew you were going to succeed there.
You and three other people.
Right. Pig's Eye was the name of St. Paul prior to St. Paul. St. Paul is is very notorious as being so much different than Minneapolis. Kind of an afterthought, kind of living in the shadow, the shadow. So with what you did, as far as, I'm going to say, like, I know you had to work to get people in the seats. I get that, but I'm going to say a lot of that maybe was built in because people were ready to call something their own. Okay. So Jack Morris, he shows up with you folks after he was the Game 7 World Series hero. You have Kevin Millar, who went on to win a World Series with the Boston Red Sox. You have Super Dave with no legs. But I'm going to tell you the biggest impact that your organization gave for me by far, like it's not even close. Isla Borders, female pitcher, first female major league pitcher. I was pulling for her from day one. And you know what? There was a lot of resistance about her, even in the Minneapolis metro area. But man, when she went out and she did it, you want to talk about kicking ass. Wow. She's a hero of mine to this day.
That makes two of us, and it's fun fact. She was my first autograph. I don't. We have a collection of non-baseballs signed by baseball players that we've kind of built over the years, and she was my first one on a baseball, and I can't ever be that guy. Getting autographs is just not what we do, and
right.
But I've always thought about that, and I've always looked back to that moment, and she's such a wonderful person. She really, which one's that?
I have an Ed Kranepool 1969 World Series. Thought
I like nice. Isla Borders. I like Isla Borders better. Sorry. Go ahead, Train.
Sorry. She's such a wonderful person, and I don't know. I can't describe it, but she just the tenacity and the wherewithal and the strength and quite frankly the player that she was. I mean, she could play, and that was the basis of all of it. But it became so much more, and it's easy to look to the cheap shots of Dave and the little person in Eddie Goodell and the fireworks and the disco records and all those things. It's easy to look to those and be like, was this another one of those? And the fact is that she was a good player, and what she had to endure to get to that, even just to that point, even to get to the point where you're at the sunrise of the sunset of your career, what she had to endure to get there was unbelievable. And so to be able to not only get her story more out there, but just show everybody what it's like for a player to get that chance and how powerful it can be is unbelievable. And she did it. And she's one of the most wonderful people on the planet. I mean, shout out to Isla. She's out in Oregon now. She's a firefighter. And I got to see her for the first time in probably, I don't know, maybe 25 years.
Wow.
Back when I was at the Saints, and it was just this wonderful moment, and we've kept in touch over the years on Facebook, but haven't been able to see her, and just to have her there and capture that story was so special. And I think hers, just like you, I think hers easily stands out the most, and I think scratching at that number 2 spot is Daryl, and that was wonderful to see, just less from a baseball perspective, but more from a life perspective, and how that club really transformed lives. I don't really have a way else to say it.
No, I mean, let's do
a teaser for the movie, because what Daryl Strawberry said about your dad, it was like, wow, and now he's a preacher, which, I'm a big time Christian. So I love the fact that he's doing that. But that line, people, I'm not going to say it. People got to go watch the movie on Netflix. If you're already a member, it's not going to cost you a dime to watch it. You're already paying your fee. But that was great. There's, for as long as the movie is, there's that many great moments in the movie, if that's possible to say. I mean, I hope you know what kind of impacted me. But it was just so many inspirational aspects of the movie. So now we've doubled our time and more We all got to go.
My
and do-
apologies.
So every once in a while, Wayne and I say this. We'd love to have you back on the show. I know you're going to be real busy because you got something coming out in a few weeks, but down the road when things calm down again, we'd love to have you back. We may just not even talk about the new stuff. We may still continue about, what's happened in the past, but hopefully there'll be more. But we'd love to have you back on the show. By far, it's an honor. I love the fact that your family was willing to share your story with the world. I think the impact is going to be greater than you could ever possibly imagine. And I'm excited to watch your career go, because now you're a buddy of mine. I got his cell phone number and I'm not giving it to anybody. But so we can keep in
Could be a
touch.
burner.
I think I love the fact that so I grew up around a fair amount of privileged people, and whether it's privileged financially or fame or whatever you want to call it, and a lot of second generations fail, or third generations fail, or fourth generations fail miserably. And to watch your family just get better and better and better, I'm just excited to see what you're going to do in your life. You have taken that positive and negative experiences they've had and made it better. And that's what people need to do. You could have chosen a lot of ways to do in your life, but you embraced your family and your heritage, and you're forging your own way. I love it when you said, invent another letter in the alphabet. I mean, that's probably the real pressure that you have, but you really don't have it. As long your dad is proud of his kids, and it's love. It's great to see the love, and it's just great to know that that you've made something more of your life as well. And I just think it has to be noted, because so many don't. I mean, we mentioned the hot tub scene a little from last night. It's hard not to mention we lost a great actor in a hot tub a couple days before.
Yeah, wow.
And
cool.
He was a guy that had all this great talent, and he had a talented family. A lot of people don't know his stepdad is pretty well known, and he took all that, but he didn't handle it. And he let addictions and all these other things destroy his life till we lost him at 54. I'd rather, I hate seeing that. And I was a huge fan of his. But I would rather think about the hot tub of one of the legends of your family versus, how he went out. How's that for a curveball, little baseball term? But, we're excited to keep watching your career go. I'm excited to know that your dad's going to have another chapter, which is all, you guys, you're inspirational to all of us guys that are trying to make things happen in the marketing world. So, do you have any closing thoughts after I stop, telling you guys how great you are again?
I can't handle it. That's
I've never talked to a dude like this.
Well, yeah, it's part of it. That's part of it. It's part of the experience, and it's tremendously kind of you. Thank you for all of that, and thank you for having me on. I think it's one of those things that it comes with a lot, and that's, as you said before, I think that's a pressure that people put on themselves, and may exist externally, it may not, but people experience in all kinds of different ways. The thing that's always been kind of funny to me is that they say talent skips a generation, and I think I don't know which way to go with this, but we're so scared of finding out who's the one that it skipped that we just work a little bit harder. So I think that's about all that I know. But thank you guys so much for having me on, and for the kind words. What's he getting this time? Another World Series ball?
You keep doing this to me. You keep giving me more info. So my famous line is, "Talent skips a generation." So my mother was a wonderful writer, and then there's me.
Oh, you said this. I got to credit you then. I've got to credit you for this line. I didn't realize.
So then my daughter, she's actually got 4 books out. She writes poetry. Wow. 27, has done extremely well. Madison Kuhn, if you want to read her poetry. So I remember telling my daughter, even before I think she even released her first book at 19, I said, "Maddie, talent skips a generation. So you're going to have, children, but your grandchildren are going to be amazing. But Callaway's a year old. I don't know if you're going to see that. My granddaughter, and I'm sure I think they're going to break the cycle, you know, just like your entire family. I don't know. That doesn't even apply to your family. There's no skipping of generation.
I don't know.
So, no. It's already been
Maybe
proven.
it does.
It's already
But
been proven.
what they don't tell you about that, and shout out to Madison, what they don't tell you about that is that they don't tell you whether that's you or the next. So
Right.
Right. I know it was me.
No, not you, the royal you. And I think that if Maddie ever thinks about that, just tell her to think that maybe the next generation has been skipped. So
Right.
I really appreciate you guys having me on. This has been wonderful, and I'm really thankful that a guy named Kelly reached out to a guy named Night Train. That's for sure.
I love it.
Thanks, Train. I appreciate you and looking forward to seeing you again. All the best, sir.
Back at you. Thank you both.
And we'll
right.
be in touch. You look very
Sounds good.
excited about what's going to happen in a few weeks. So we're all staying tuned.
Yeah, definitely check in. It'll be a big update.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Ciao, everybody.